Hello everyone, we meet again. Now let's talk about population, sample and sampling in survey research. So now let me emphasize that sampling is the main key in survey research. Why? Because we will depend solely on what our respondents or participants will tell us while responding to our questions or surveys. So that being said, the way that we determine the sample will be really crucial in determining the quality of our research results. There are several terms that we need to understand in sampling. The first one is the population itself, and then there's what's called the sampling frame, the sample itself, and then the element. I will discuss each of these terms one by one. Okay, so the first important term in sampling is, of course, population. Population is the group of elements for which the survey investigator wants to make inferences or want to generalize by using the sample statistics. So we get a result from a specific sample, and then to which larger group that we want to basically generalize that research result that we get from that specific sample into. So there are two types of populations actually. So there's target population and there's survey population. The target population is really the population that we are really targeting, the survey or the research. So for example, the target population, if we want to study about like Indonesian people, then like if we want to study the whole nation, then our target population will be the whole all Indonesian citizens. That's the example. All Indonesians will be our target populations in the whole country. But sometimes there are situations in which we cannot access everyone, maybe due to conflicts or like natural disasters. So we cannot enter a specific area or a place that's isolated from outsiders. Like we cannot enter that place. It would be really difficult for us to enter that area, so we have to restrict ourselves from collecting data from those areas. So our survey population would be the whole Indonesia, minus those places that we cannot access. Okay, so next is the sample itself. So sample is basically the group of elements that are selected from a target or survey population that typically represents a population. So we are selecting a smaller group, so that we can, so for sure we cannot, collect data from all 270 million Indonesian people. So we would want to select, smaller groups, maybe not 270 million, but perhaps only 1 million, something like that. But we want our sample to represent at least some of the characteristics of the population. Next is the sampling frame. Sampling frame is simply a simple list of population elements. So the frames may be maps of areas in which elements can be found, time periods during which target events would occur, or records in filing cabinets, among others. So it could contains the list of information about like if our population is that the whole Indonesian people, then we would have our sampling frame would be a list of names, addresses, phone numbers of all Indonesian people. So that's the sampling frame. So basically the list of information of each of the population elements. So what's actually element? Element is the smallest unit in a population. So that's if we want to study if our population is again the whole Indonesia, then our element will be one Indonesian citizen. So this the identification and selection of the elements is the core of all sampling techniques. So basically in sampling we are selecting a group of elements to be our sample. Okay, so this is an example. If a researcher wants to do a study to examine faculty of psychology UGM students' satisfaction towards the academic service during the online learning period, for example, then what's the population? The population will be all students of the Faculty of Psychology, Universitas Gadjah Mada, all of them. The sampling frame will be all information, list of student information, so it can contains email addresses, phone, anything that we can use to contact the element of the study. And then sample will be, okay, since we may not have time or the resources, the facilities to access all the students, especially during this online learning period, so then we will just select, for example, 50 students of the Faculty of Psychology, Universitas Gadjah Mada. So then who is the element? So the element will be a student, one single student of the Faculty of Psychology, Universitas Gadjah Mada. So now let's talk about the sampling itself. So sampling again is the process of selecting respondents or participants that represent a population. So generally there are two types of sampling techniques. The first one is probability sampling. So in probability sampling, every single element, every single individual in the population gets the same opportunity, the same probability to participate in the survey. So it means that we will have to know the size of the population precisely and accurately, so that the students of Faculty of Psychology, Universitas Gadjah Mada, we might need to know, we might need to go to the academic section and ask, how many students who are actively enrolled in the Faculty of Psychology this semester, for example. And the selection, basically the selection that's conducted using the probability sampling is done through random process. The second sampling technique is non-probability sampling. So in non-probability sampling, this is basically the opposite of the probability sampling. Probability versus non-probability sampling, so that's easy. This is opposites, from each other. In non-probability sampling, there's no guarantee that all elements, every single individual in the population will get the same opportunity to participate in the survey, which means that the probability of each element, of each individual, every single individual in the population to be part of the sample cannot be determined. So because there's no guarantee, we don't do random sampling here, we don't do random selection here. So how do we do probability and non-probability samplings? There are several methods. In probability sampling, there are simple random sampling, systematic sampling, stratified random sampling, proportionate stratified sampling, and cluster sampling. And in non-probability sampling, there are convenience sampling and quota sampling. So I will discuss about this one by one. Okay, so now let's first talk about the methods in probability sampling. The first one will be the simple random sampling. So here, sample is randomly selected from the sampling frame. So basically, we have that, all the list of the information of all Indonesian people, if our population is Indonesians, or we have all the information about the Faculty of Psychology UGM students, if our population is the Faculty of Psychology UGM students, and then we'll just randomly select them. We have their names, and then we'll just randomly select them using any, we can use softwares, we can do it manually, depending on how big is our population and our sample size would be. But there are things to be considered. First, for sure, we have to know, the population size first. Again, accurately and precisely. So population must be defined precisely. We must have the list of information of all population elements. This also requires population homogeneity, and of course it is only practical for smaller population size. So if we want to again do like study with Indonesian people, it is very, very hard, very, very difficult for us to get the list of information of each of Indonesian citizens, from the babies until the old people. So that's gonna be cumbersome for us. So it's only practical for smaller population size. So perhaps, students, faculty of psychology, Universitas Gadjah Mada students, perhaps we can still get information easier. Like at least we can access, the information. We can ask the academic section. Yeah, but it's still kind of also, for an undergraduate student, it's also a bit, complex, to do this. It also requires population homogeneity. So here we treat all population, all elements in the population as if they are homogeneous. Yeah, there's no variation. Yes, so there's no variation in anything. Yeah, so we just, because we don't know how many female respondents, male respondents that we will get by just simply randomize our sample from the population. So we might get 100,000 of female respondents and 700,000 of male respondents, because it's just we just randomly select them from a very large list. And the next method is systematic sampling. So this is similar to random sampling, but we select them based on the order of the the list. So based on where they are placed, the participants are placed on the list. So the selection of participants was conducted based on the order of the participants. So for example, if there are 100 people in the population, and if the researchers want to select only 20 people out of 100, then researchers will select participants who are listed in number 5 and then number 10, 15, so the multiplication of 5 or multiplication of 4, whatever. But it's more systematic. So instead of just randomly select the sample, we have sort of like system by seeing the order of where the participants are placed on the list. Next is stratified random sampling. It has even more systematic way than the systematic sampling. So if our population consists of various groups and participants are selected randomly from each of the group, then that's called the stratified random sampling. So for example, if our population is high school students in Yogyakarta, then we will randomly select 50 students from each high school in the city. From SMA 1, SMA 1 until SMA 11. So there are like 11 high school, like public high school, for example, and then we will just randomly select students from each. So we will randomly select 50 students from each SMA, from each high school. This increased the sample representativeness, because we are not only just simply selecting them randomly out of the blue, but we choose, we know that, okay, 50 students from SMA 1, 50 students from SMA 2, like this. So there is more system in selecting the sample. And then the next one will be proportionate sampling. This is also when our population consists of various groups and participants are selected randomly from each of the group, but the sample size of each group represents the actual ratio of the groups in the population. So for example, if our population consists of 75% male residents, and then the rest are male residents, so 75% male and 25% female, then our sample will also consist of 75% male and 25% female respondents. So for example, if the population in Yogyakarta, for example, consists of 75% male and 25% female respondents. So we will, randomly select. Yeah. So if there are like 1,000 residents in that city, then we would want to have, if our sample size will be 1,000, yeah, for example, if we want to have 1,000 participants in our study, which is our sample size, not the population size, then we would have 750 male respondents, which we randomly select, yeah, from the group of male residents in the whole city, and then 250 female participants, which we also randomly select from the whole female residents of the whole city. The last one is cluster sampling. So again, this is when our population consists of various groups, and researchers randomly select the groups, yeah, not the individuals, not the elements, but the groups, yeah. Randomly select those groups first before determining the elements. So here, the group or cluster is the one that is being randomized, yeah, randomly selected, not the individuals. So if we go back again to the high schools in Yogyakarta example, then it will be like this. Researchers would first randomly select the high schools in Yogyakarta, for example, only selecting 5 schools, yeah, so from SMA 1 until SMA 11, for example, just randomly select them, and we want to choose 5, yeah, and then only students in these 5 schools, so we only get 5, we already get 5 schools, then only students in these 5 schools will participate in the study. Yeah, so so here the one that's randomly selected is the cluster, yeah, and then how we select the elements from each of the selected schools, we can also randomly select them, yeah, we can do random selection as well, or we can also mix it, yeah, with what we will call convenience sampling in each of the schools, but we already randomly select the group first. Okay, so next we're gonna be talking about the methods for non-probability sampling. The first one is convenience sampling. This is very typical, yeah, to use, yeah. And actually in this class you will be using this convenience sampling for your survey, yeah. So this here, participants are selected based on their availability and willingness to participate in the study. So we find this a lot, polling, yeah, polling. So who participate in polling, yeah, typically are people who are willing to participate, right, in the survey, in the polling. And then TV or radio call-in survey, sometimes when you're watching TV or you're listening to radio, and then they're kind of like, we have a survey about, we want to know about your opinion about like a presidential candidate or something like that, and then they're doing a call-in survey. Yeah, you can call them, to share your opinion with them, or responding to their surveys. You can call, or you can text, yeah, or using whatever other media that they're using nowadays. Pop-up online survey, like we have this happening many times. Yeah, well, you watch YouTube and then you find YouTube survey, yeah, you actually have the ability, you have the ability to just skip the survey, right? Because you just want to watch whatever the video that you want to watch, and so that you will not participate, because if you skip the survey, then you will not participate. So who will participate? Yeah, those people who do not skip the survey. So this is convenience sampling. So the response, the data would be collected only from those who are willing to participate. And sometimes we are, for example, if we want to study about that academic service, for example, maybe not during online learning period, but maybe during the offline learning period, and then you have this, you see a kind of like small survey, like tell us what you feel, how satisfied are you, with the service that we provide today, for example. So not everyone fill out this survey, right? But only those who are willing to fill out the survey, then they will complete the survey. That's called convenience sampling. Limitation is this is easy, easy to be done, because you don't need to force anyone. But limitation is that participants may not represent the population characteristics, because you don't know. Again, you don't know who will participate in your study, whether they will represent, if the characteristics, based on the like ratio of the population or not. You just get whatever you get. And then the next one in non-probability sampling is quota sampling. This is you're trying to ensure all element groups in the population are represented in the sample, even though the sampling selection is based on convenience. So this is similar to the proportionate stratified sampling, but without the random selection. So again, if we know that the population consists of 75% of male and 25% of female, then we will just making sure that, okay, again, we want to have 1,000 elements in our sample, then we will want to have 750 female participants and 750 male participants and 250 female participants. But we are using convenience sampling, so but then we will stop the data collection based on whether the quota has been fulfilled or not. So if we get already 750 female respondents, then we stop the data collection for the male respondent. And then for the female, the same thing. So if we already get 250 data from female respondents, then we stop the data collection. So basically we are trying to at least trying to mimic the characteristic of the population, but we don't do any random sampling, random selection. We just try to make sure the ratio. So if sometimes also in some studies we want to balance the gender, so we want to have 50-50 gender in our sample. So that's what we're gonna do. So we're having quota, and then we will stop data collection once the quota is fulfilled. So researchers only making sure that each group sample size represents the proportion or ratio of the group in the population. Things to be considered in sampling. First is representativeness. It's very important, and actually this is the most important thing, that our sample represent the population. So it must represent the population and the population characteristics, but in reality it's not always easy to be done. And we know, I probably have discussed before about this, that most of the psychological theories were developed from a specific sample. That's the weird sample, the Western educated, industrialized, rich and democratic sample. And they are probably not represent the whole world population, right? But we tend to generalize what we get from this weird population, weird sample, to the whole world population. So it's not always easy, and we tend to fall into this. And then the next one is the selection bias. Especially when we are using the convenience sampling, we just collecting data from those who are willing to participate, and not from the sampling technique, like a specific more systematic sampling technique like random selection in probability sampling. So some sampling procedure like this convenience sampling might result in over or underrepresentativeness in one of the population segments, and then the sample will have different characteristics from the population. So again, in many psychological studies, because we typically are using college students, specifically psychology college students, and majority of the psychology students are typically female students. So then we will have the upper representativeness of the female participants, but the male participants will be underrepresented in many psychological studies. And then the sample size. There is this law of large numbers. So the larger the sample size, it's very common sense. The larger the sample size, the more representative is the population. It's very common sense, and for sure, if we have 270 million people in our population, and if we have nearly the same number of the population, then for sure, yeah, it's common sense that this sample would be representing the population characteristic. But that's not what we call sample. Yeah, that's we are sampling. We are sampling the population so that we don't have to study the whole population, but using some statistical analysis, and by ensuring that our sample is representative enough, then we would want our research results that we get from a smaller sample size compared to the population size we will be able to generalize the results to the whole population. So that's the main goal of sampling, so that we don't need to study the whole population because it's too cumbersome, time consuming, costly. These are the references. Thank you, and we will meet again in the next videos.